Good afternoon and welcome to the AW Services YouTube channel. Today's video, another video based upon the Akai professional sampler. This is the Akai S01 sampler that I've just acquired, and in this video I'm going to be installing the new Gotek Floppy USB emulator, as I have done with the same in my previous samplers. So we'll fit that into there and we're going to do that now. So like any sampler, safety, make sure the device is unplugged and it's been left unpowered for some time, just in case there's any residual current left in any of the capacitors inside. And to get apart an Akai, it's very simple. You've got 4 screws. I'm going to move the camera in and out as best as I can. 4 screws, as I mentioned, 2 in the sides, 1 in the rear. Just got this sampler, like I just mentioned, and I would say it's in pretty much pristine condition. It looks like I'm the second owner from new. Hardly any scratches at all on there. The lid hasn't had mugs of coffee sat on it. All of the switches and knobs are still functional, and they're not that discoloured either. I had one of these, well, I'll tell you a bit of a backstory. I saw one of these in my local music shop when I was about age 15, and then a couple of years later I went and brought one. Had this with a Korg M1 keyboard synthesizer and started making breakbeat hardcore jungle tracks as a kid. So the Akai S01, unlike its big brothers and sisters, the S2000, S2800 that I own, this one doesn't have a lot inside it. But as you can see inside, it is spotless. There isn't a single bit of dust anywhere to be seen, and that's just perfection in my eyes. So to get the floppy drive out and to replace the floppy drive for the Gotek Floppy USB emulator, just reposition some lighting. We need to remove the floppy drive, and all I'm doing now is just looking inside the machine to ascertain how it's connected and where those connections go. So first of all, we're going to need to remove the ribbon cable. To remove the ribbon cable, some of them, if they haven't ever been tampered with, can be quite tight. I think this machine was built in about 1993. So all you need to do with a very fine flathead screwdriver is gently just ease apart the pins and the connector and lift the connector off. And we also need to take note that the discoloration that's highlighted on the top of this ribbon cable needs to go back in that orientation once we have finished our installation. And also our power connector, we can quite easily see that the pins on the power connector and this ridge are facing upwards, and that always remains on the top. So again, we just gently need to pry this connector off. Give it a little wiggle, you don't have to be forceful with it. I'm just trying to avoid pulling on any of the wiring because it's quite old. That connector is now free. The other thing we need to be mindful of is the ribbon cable here, which is a select input channel switch, and that runs over, so we don't need to be tugging on that and damaging that either. So now looking at the machine, take it off of my box that I've had it stood on. Just going to move you back and set you back on the floor. We have 4 screws to remove the chassis carriage that holds that in place, and it's this screw, this one and that one. So we need to carefully remove those. Try to give the best camera angle I can for this video, however it's quite awkward, but you'll see what I'm on about. Just a little side note that if you do have the original Akai one, or so, say for example you've got an Akai S01, S1000, S2000, S2800, if you have got that sampler and you do have its setup, Akai setup disc, then there's no reason really that you need to change the Gotek Floppy emulator. However, you know, if you want to be a purist, you would keep it, and I would most definitely keep it. However, floppy disks, and the floppy disks that I had from around 1994, they all died. They just didn't work a couple of years ago when I tried them. So they are sensitive to magnetic forces and various other problems, and moisture and humidity. But with the Gotek device, it's purely running on a USB SanDisk memory stick. So like all of the other previous Akai samplers, the floppy drive has now been removed from the machine, and we now need to remove the galvanized chassis carriage that sits in. So I'll just push the Akai back, readjust the camera, and we need to be careful that we don't mix our screws up in case we have different screws. But these screws here we won't be using because the Gotek emulator relies on self-tappers, and these are machine screws or panhead screws. So looking at the orientation, that's the way we need to put it back in. When I opened my Gotek device when it was delivered yesterday, I did note that there was something different about its installation process. Something to do with the height that it sits within the machine. So we'll need to look at that, but I believe we need to jack up the front of this plate. So like for like, this is the Gotek Floppy USB emulator. I purchased these from Chris Poacher, CP Magnetic Media Limited, who you can find on eBay, and I'll post a link in the description of the video. But that fits in perfectly, which is really nice, and it's exactly the same colour as well. So our floppy drive, it works. I'll wrap that up in some tissue paper and some tin foil, and I'll put that in the box and keep them safe along with all the others that I have. So just taking a bit of a deep dive into the packaging that comes with the Gotek device. Always read all instructions. You might think, oh, I'm a man, I don't need to read instructions. We don't do that as men. But read the instructions, because it may invalidate your warranty if you do something and you miss a step, you get it wrong, and then something goes bang, or you injure yourself. So, you know, be careful. I'm not one to preach health and safety. I think it's quite boring in all honesty. Okay. Installing the floppy emulator drive Akai range. A replacement floppy drive is around 1 to 2 millimeters shorter in height than the original Akai floppy. There are two ways to get the drive looking flush. The best way, use the supplied foam strip and stick it to the bottom of the floppy drive bracket. Brilliant. And then near the front screws between the bracket and the chassis, and then you can use it to tighten. Okay, understood. So in our packet, with every floppy USB emulator drive, we position the camera, a little package with all the instructions, and there is some closed cell neoprene self-adhesive tape, which from looking at the instructions, I believe we need to sit it here. So that goes underneath, just to give it some elevation, because apparently it's slightly off. Also in the package, because the Gotek device uses self-tapping screws, these are the screws that we need to use to secure our device into the chassis. So we know through the orientation that this will sit in the machine that way around, but then sits carefully in here like so. Just going to line up the screw holes. I'm doing this on my lounge floor because it's a bit easier than doing it on the table, because it's quite a spread out thing really, with the amount of stuff that you need to do it and to have the space for the machine. brilliant. Just trying to get the screws in their position without pushing them all the way in. I see. I was just a bit confused because there is another screw there. There's 3 holes on the side of the device. However, I was panicking because the rear screw hole doesn't look like it was actually drilled out. When you make plastic, whether it's injection molding, you have what you call a gate, and then you have a flash, and when you injection mold, there's always a piece of plastic debris that doesn't get removed a lot of the time, and that's why the end hole didn't look like it would open up. I'm using an electric screwdriver because I can. If you use one, just be very mindful of the amount of pressure you're using and the amount of force. The last thing you want to do is ram the screwdriver in hard, over torque these screws, and then crack the enclosure. I'm now using a standard screwdriver just to nip those up, not over tighten them, just nip them up so they're snug. There isn't a lot of weight now in the machine. You've just reduced probably about, I don't know, 500 grams or so. So that is the Gotek device now securely fixed within the chassis plate. So now I'm going to put this in the machine from the rear. Just going to move the camera. So our Gotek device, we'll slot it in that way there. Just do a test fit. Just trying to ascertain the use of the foam tape because I don't even think I need it, to be honest. Yep, our metal chassis is in full contact with the base of the machine. I don't think we need that. Let's just put it together and see what happens. Hit and hope, as they say. Right, let's tilt the camera up again so you can see. Do not ever tilt your sampler on the floor so the knobs are digging into the carpet. A lot of the buttons are quite old, they are quite brittle and you could snap them. Yeah, so our Gotek device is sitting flush within the machine and there isn't any need for the foam tape, which is a very strange one. Nothing bad against the seller because they've been very informative, always very helpful, but I don't see why we need it. This sample of the Akai S01 I would say would be one of the very easiest and best samplers to start with. So if you're new and you want to get into hardware sampling, then this could be a good start for you. Very easy to use. I will do a review on the S01 very shortly and a talk through its functionality because it may help some others. And if you type Akai S01 into YouTube, I think you'll find there's only 4 videos. So I'm going to try to make one to add something a bit different to help other people. And again, when you secure the chassis plate in, there is really no need to ram the screws in hard. So with reference to the foam tape, as I previously mentioned, I've got my Gotek in. I'm just going to put this down and I'll reposition the camera and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So mine is now installed and I've got exactly the same thin hairline gap in the top of the Gotek device and the original chassis front plate of the machine. So I don't really see there's any need for the foam tape, so I'm going to leave that out and use that for a rainy day if I need to. But our Gotek is sat on the chassis of the machine. It's in level, as you can see here, and it fits in perfectly. So now the next thing we need to do, move you again, we need to reposition and reattach our ribbon cable from the main motherboard. The ribbon cable, as I took it off, is exactly the same replacement. However, you just need to eye in and make sure that you have the pin alignments on the ribbon cable socket in exactly the right place, because you could get them and push them in and realize you've only connected the top row. So you need to hold it, make sure it's flat in your hand, and push it on firmly but not forcefully. And then also you need to reattach the power cable. So like many of these machines, the length of the floppy drive is different to the Gotek device. So the one problem we have is our power supply cable does not reach. So again, very carefully, we need to cut and remove the cable tie on the back of the motherboard, which is this one here. And then with the ribbon cable, a lot of camera moving in this one here, which goes onto the backboard. We also need to then cut, this tripod's annoying, we also need to cut this cable tie here. So when you cut these old cable ties, you need to pinch the cables and make sure you do not cut through them. So there is no need really to have these all cable tied. If you're using the machine in a rack case and you're taking it out on the road with you to run a keyboard sampler sequencer controller, then you might want to make sure that these are always cable tied in place, because they could vibrate loose. So now we've got our cable, got enough slack on there, and we can push that back in onto the back of our Gotek, ensuring all of our pins are in place. So we've cut some cable ties, and we can now re-cable tie just to stop any wiggle or unnecessary movement which may strain the connectors. So with a very small thin cable tie, just pop it on. You haven't got to tighten it right up and suffocate all the wiring. There's no need for that. That will do for me. So the next step is we need to plug our device back in. Be careful, the machine is now live and there are exposed wiring. In our packet from Supreme Magnetic Media, you will then find the thumb drive. This has all of the Akai disk images to run the boot sequence, and it also holds a sample library with lots of amazing instruments, percussion, samples from the 90s and all sorts on here, and it helps you record. So now our machine, we turn it on. Our 3-segment LED display on this machine is ran, and then we have our boot sequence, which is already done, and we can go through our Gotek device. At the moment there are a few sample directories missing on this because they weren't able to be converted, but they will be done very shortly and then sent out in a link via an email. But it's not a problem because I'm going to use this and record all of my own into the device. And then you've got here, you press go and it's all working. So now I'm just going to very quickly reattach the lid. I'm going to move the camera out, turn the device off. When reattaching the lid, there is a certain shape and profile where this longer section goes in behind the rack case ears here. With the screws that we put aside for that particular lid, which are the larger, bigger screws, just gently make sure the case is sitting flush, which it is. We also have the single screw in the back. Yeah, this machine, the back of this S01 is absolutely immaculate. There's not even a scratch on it. And we need to reattach our two screws on this side. So that is how you install a floppy USB emulator Gotek device into the Akai S01 sampler. Some very key things to touch upon. So before you use your sampler for the first time, the USB thumb drive stick, ideally before you even turn on your machine for the first time, is ensure that this gets backed up and you create and copy another file with everything that's on this and put it onto your laptop or your PC. And also, if you have it, or if not, I suggest you do buy one. Buy another memory stick of a high quality nature, such as the SanDisk or the Cruiser range from SanDisk, minimum of 16 gigabytes, and copy that onto that other memory stick, put it back in its plastic packet and put it back in this package here, and keep it safe. That means that if you lose everything on that stick, you can replace it. With every installation, with every time you install something new, especially like this machine here, please read and make sure you understand the instruction manual. This also holds your warranty. It also holds your quick step guides. It tells you everything there is to know about the device. And these are set up specifically where you shouldn't have to change the jumper pins in the back. I've never had one. I've used 3 of these now and I've not had a single problem with any of them. But that is how you install the Gotek Floppy USB emulator into an Akai S01 sampler. If you have any questions about the video, or there's not anything you're not sure of, please feel free to comment below. I will get back to you and give you the best answer if I can, and if I can't, I will signpost you to Chris at CP Magnetic Media Limited. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy the content, please, if you can, hit subscribe and help my channel grow, which makes it then open it up to a wider viewing to many other people. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends if you have anybody that's interested in this kind of thing, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.